Welcome, everyone. My name is Beth Frost Johnson, and I'm the moderator for today's webinar sponsored by Foundry Deeper Learning Solutions. Just a few little housekeeping items about the webinar. Our conversation with the Durango educators will last about 50 minutes, and we will have some Q&A time possibly during the webinar and possibly at the end, depending upon how questions come in. Speaking of questions, if you have any questions for our speakers, just type them in the questions tab in the gray box in the participants panel on your right. I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers today. Dreyer Robertson has been working with Personalized project-based learning for the last 10 years as a teacher, advisor, and administrator with the sole mission of creating an engaging and relevant curriculum for at-risk students. He has extensive experience navigating state and district systems of curriculum design and specializes in finding relevance for students within those systems. Chelsea Reinsch is an advisor English teacher at Durango Big Picture High School at the secondary level. She has worked in competency-based learning with Common Core standards as well as within the Durango School District performance indicators. Chelsea's student, Ava Aragon, will present her work on her senior thesis project, Alternative Treatments to ADHD. Dr. Camille Mortimer is a leader in learning-centered and project-based learning as well as administrative leadership, professional learning, and organizational development. She was founder and head learning of a project-based public charter school in Milwaukee and has served as a superintendent and principal for over 18 years. She is now Foundry's Chief Learning Officer. Camille, to you.
Thanks, Beth. Dreyer, Chelsea, greetings. I see that perhaps there are two Dreyers here today and no Camille. I'm Camille. Drew's the other one over there. I think the labeling might be wrong, but we're really glad to be here today doing this conversation with you. Anything you want to add right now, Drew or Chelsea?
No, happy to be here.
Yeah, pretty excited to share what we're doing. We feel like we're in our own little world right now, especially with COVID isolation stuff happening. So it's kind of nice to connect with people outside of this world.
Yes, absolutely. A little bit of our history. Drew and I met through Foundry and Durango Big Picture High School's robust use of the Foundry platform. A few years back, I was visiting Durango. It's down in the far southwest corner of Colorado. And I learned about the wonderful real world work that they're doing there. We've kind of been connected ever since. And this whole thing about COVID brought us talking again about the tough decisions that schools are making recently and about safety and learning and engaging kids. So Drew, perhaps you could just spend a little bit of time talking about Durango Big Picture High School and your current reality.
Oh, current reality, I would love to redefine, but that's not how it works. So current reality in our school district in Durango is that we're offering 3 different models to students, not just in our building, but across the district. And so we have 5-day a week in-person instruction happening. Then we have a blended model where students are in buildings 2 to 3 days a week, and then also doing remote learning from home. And then we also have fairly decent sized population that's doing 100% remote learning. You know, COVID caused quite the scare for schools in Colorado as far as budgets were concerned. And so we have basically maximized everybody's energy to be able to offer as many options for students and families as possible so we can retain everybody. As far as the school is concerned, if you want to click on that next slide, I can talk about that a little bit.
Nope, you're just going to have to wait a minute. You have to wait a minute for that.
Yeah. I get ahead of myself and then I talk too much. Those are the 2 things you should know about me right now.
When we get there.
So that's our reality. Some things are fully functioning and some things are completely limited. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I think everybody's there. And, you know, that's why we really wanted to talk about personalization and how everyone is managing to personalize whatever you're teaching. And if you're not, we think we have some ideas for you today about that. We want to be really focused on real and rigorous and relevant. And we know that engagement of students right now is almost everything. For people showing up, they need to be showing up. And that's a hard push for everybody. So getting at this engagement question through passion and how that passion drives toward academic success. And you're going to see that at Durango Big Picture. A big concern of everybody at Durango Big Picture and here at Foundry, and I think for you as well, all of you who have joined us today, is how to increase agency for students and for teachers. How do all of us own what it is we're working on right now? And you're going to hear a lot about that as we proceed through the conversation. And then, of course, the whole thing about distance learning and what we're calling COVID careful classrooms, wherever your learners are. How do we, in fact, do this work during this time and beyond, but during this time in particular? So I want to just point to deeper learning. We're doing this in the context of how we're all working to move to deeper learning. These are the 6 competencies that come from the Hewlett Foundation. And they're all about getting at mentored inquiry-based learning that's problem finding and problem solving, real world, complex learning. And so particularly, obviously, the 21st century skills, the first 4, but then the learning how to learn, you know, helping young people become self-directed learners, setting goals and tracking their own progress. You'll hear us talk about that today. And then developing academic mindsets, particularly around ethical behavior, character, resilience, mindfulness, the things that are beyond the academic work, the mindsets that make all that work. So this is the context we're working in, and we really want to point to this conversation being one about levers that move toward deeper learning. So would you be listening for levers around time, use of time, relationship, audience, connection with others in the community, agency, and about reflection? These are the things that we know actually bring change, and building structures around this is just really essential to this move toward deeper learning. So with that, Drew, if you tell us more about Big Picture Learning and your high school there in Durango, we would be delighted to hear about it.
All right. So, you know, Big Picture Learning is a network of schools that's international at this point, and all of them are based on the premise that accessing student passions and interests is what drives them to be engaged with their learning. And so, you know, there are not 2 big picture schools that look identical. And so for us, we are, you know, we do have state standards, and we do have all the things that other public high schools in Colorado have to follow. And so we have three different areas for students to engage with their learning. The first one is very traditional. We have what we call experiences, which are traditional classroom instruction, but they're highly personalized. And we're going to talk about that within each subject area and then look at some student work. And then the second piece is our independent projects. And so that's kind of the driving force of what we do. Students identify things that they're curious about or interested about or passionate about. And then it's our job as advisors to help them tailor their research and their products towards state standards and towards, you know, the things that will measure evidence for their accomplishments, if you will. And then I would say probably the biggest and most important piece, at least in this building, is about professional real world learning. You know, we want our students to have relevance and have things happening for them within the community. And we strongly, strongly believe that learning doesn't only happen from instruction from teachers. Learning can happen, you know, we're going to talk a lot today about one of our community partnerships and what they're doing with science, but there are a lot of people out there that know a whole lot more about specific subjects than Chelsea or I do. And so we found a way to access those people and to have beneficial relationships between the school and the students and the community. So that's what we got going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to personalization then.
Okay, so this is kind of our theme for the whole day. I know it's about engagement, but this is how we engage our students. The question under there that's not really a question. It's just fun to put a question mark with why. But this could really say a lot of things. It could say giving students the why as it does. It could say helping students find the why. It could say students discovering the why, but really what we want to get at is the why. And so when we talk about direct instruction and things that are coming from us as instructors, it's always being able to answer the question for the students, why are they doing this? When we talk about independent projects and things that students want to pursue with their own learning, they should be able to answer that question. What is their why? Why are they engaged with this? And then we're going to talk a lot about local and starting locally and thinking globally. And so, looking at reasons for students to engage with what's going on around them and what's going on in the world and things that they are impacted by. And so that's kind of the lens for today, is how we personalize all aspects. So we're going to run through each of the core content areas. I'm going to do this fairly briefly, but feel free to pop in with questions or to ask me things at the end. So we're going to start with English, and this is Chelsea's specialty. Within English, there's reading, writing, and oral communication. And everything I'm referring to today definitely has ties to Common Core standards. If you hear Chelsea or I use the word performance indicator today, that is just Durango School District's. We basically took Common Core standards and added Bloom's taxonomy verbs to it. So when we talk about reading, this is an area that has been our strongest performing test-wise area for the last decade. And the reason that our students perform well within reading is because we let them choose what they're reading. And so when we're talking about different aspects of standards that you need to do, like character analysis, or looking at themes and comparing themes, or any of those things, they don't have to be a prescribed set of literature that we give to students. They don't all have to read the same thing. They just have to demonstrate the same skills. And so, an exercise we do every year is we set aside a little money in our budget and we take groups of students to the bookstore to choose their own books. So they get a brand new book from the beautiful little bookstore down the street. It just makes it more accessible when it's something that they chose. Then within writing, so for us, writing happens across all content areas. And so writing there is some explicit writing instruction, obviously, but we try to bring it into all things. And so when we're talking about personalization, it's really easy for students to write a fact-based report and regurgitate something they read online. What's not easy is for students to take that information, formulate an opinion, support arguments, support hypothesis. And so we really try to ask the question of our students in their writing: where is their voice? Where is what's the why, right? We come back to that why. Why am I reading this? I didn't need to learn a few facts about Hawaii. I want to know why you care about it and why it's important and how it impacts other subjects. And then oral communication, I want to touch on, just as, and Chelsea can speak to this as well, but we use academic discourse as a format and a platform for students to demonstrate their learning. And so it doesn't always have to be a written book report. I've had extensive, lengthy conversations about themes within literature with students for them to be able to demonstrate their learning. And so I just, anything we can do to give students as many modalities to demonstrate what they've learned and what they're learning and why, that's what we're trying to do. Do you want to throw anything in there, Chelsea?
Yeah, the thing that I also wanted to add was how we allow students to apply their writing and how that looks in the real world. So whereas when you think formally within education, you think an argumentative writing is a persuasive piece regarding climate change. And that's something we encourage our students to do within their senior thesis, to look at a global issue and bring it locally. But informative writing and a persuasive argument can also be something that falls within a cover letter or a informative text to explain to a larger population something that you care about. So it's about how we drive students to look at writing and the rhetoric that they're using within their writing, and about how they share that with a larger audience and about what that application means.
Cool.
I want to touch back. I just want to touch back to something that really struck me that you said, Drew, and that is taking the students to the bookstore. And I'm really struck when we talk about equity. You know, I think about how many times I've taken my kids or my grandkids to the bookstore, how much time I've spent there with them. And I'm thinking about how many students never get that opportunity, that they have not been taken, nor do they wander into a bookstore. And yet that wonderful kind of smell and feel, and just that whole context of being in a place that's all about words and access to words. The library as well, of course, but there's something about the bookstore. So I just think that's a wonderful piece that might draw students back again and again. So it's real world, isn't it? And yeah.
And it's an awesome way as a teacher to build a really excellent library for students. So, you know, we do this every year. So in every classroom, we've got 20 new books a year that have been chosen based on student interest. So I've now got a decade worth of those books in my classroom. And so it just gives you a resource that you don't necessarily find on your own, even when you think you know what student interest is.
Yeah, and so the kids aren't keeping the book, they're putting it in the library, but they're helping to choose the library content. Does I get that right?
Right. But it's their library in their classroom and their advisory for all 4 years, right?
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's really powerful. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. All right, well, let's move on here and talk about math.
Talking about math. So math is always my favorite subject to get questions about how you personalize. So I get to brag about our math teacher today. So the way that, and his name is Mark, the way that Mark has structured math is to front load skills. So he isolates the skills from standards and then front loads the skills and then gives students choice about how they are going to apply those skills to their product to demonstrate their learning. So we're going to look at two different things really quickly. The first one is currently from Mark's geometry class. And so they're doing basic geometry, just angles and segments and lines and how to show congruence and all that fun jazz. And so what Mark did was he asked them to create art where they were representing all of these concepts and skills that they had learned. And so the reason I have the two pictures here is because they represent two very different students within his class. The product on the left came from a student whose entire world is art. That is his driving passion in all things he does. And this student took all of the concepts and the requirements Mark asked and spent over 7 hours creating this product. And so when we're talking about the personalization, I definitely challenge everyone to think about how many students they know that spent 7 hours on a math project, right? So obviously that's engaging. And then the reason the one on the right is there is because it's a student on the polar opposite end of the spectrum who thinks that stick figures are difficult to draw and doesn't believe that she can be an artist in any way. But she still managed to do what she needed to do. She still created something she's proud of. And after they presented it, she promptly went and hung it on the wall for all to see. So even the student that was skeptical and pessimistic still found a little bit of joy in the work that she was doing. The next thing we're going to talk about is a way that Mark has had students demonstrating learning in algebra. And so the same thing, they went over some fairly basic concepts at the beginning of the year. And then Mark asked all of his students to create videos to submit that were them demonstrating the concepts. And so we're going to watch this video and then we'll talk about it just a bit more afterwards.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to part 2 of the Power to the Power exponents. Now, this is example 2, but we are working with the exact same problem, 2 to the power of 3 to the power of 2. Now, instead of multiplying the exponents like we did last time, we will be just taking 2 to the power of 3, which that is 2 times 2 times 2, as you can see here. And 2 times 2 is equivalent to 4. And 4 times 2 is equivalent to 8, which then we will simply take 8 and put it to the power of 2, because we haven't used that one up yet. Now, that would equal 8 times 8, and 8 times 8 is 64, just as last time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this. I hope this helped you, and have a great day.
So, I just like showing this because while it is simplistic, when a student or a teacher is teaching, that's a real demonstration of understanding. It's one thing to be able to pass a quiz or finish a worksheet, but to be able to teach others is a big deal. I also think it's cool. So the student you're going to meet later, Ava, she also did this assignment and she used fire for her examples. And so she had exponentially growing fire. And so it's just a good example of how students just got to put their own interpretation of the skills that they were learning and demonstrate it in different personalized ways. Also wanted to share this because if you are in a remote learning situation, this is a great way to give students a different way to give you products. It's no matter what you're using, whether it's Google Classroom or Project Foundry or one of 800 other learning management systems for your model, almost all of them have the ability to share these kinds of resources and these kinds of products. And so it's just a cool way to engage the kids for sure.
And I was just talking with another Foundry school in Colorado, and they were talking about engagement and terrible enrollment problems, not enrollment problems, attendance problems right now. Enrollment was fine, but attendance was at 50%, just a staggeringly worrisome number. And they were talking about lesson assigning. And I couldn't help but imagine if they flipped what they were doing instead of returning digital content to the teacher that is worksheet like, they move to something like this, how much different a bit of engagement might be going on and kids showing up. So I think it's a really powerful way. So all right, here we go. Social study.
Social studies. So there's a big old red sign at the bottom. Start with here, start with now. So there are so many things going on in the lives of our students this year that it's overwhelming to most of them. But it creates an incredible opportunity when we're discussing social studies to work in reverse chronological order. And so we get the best engagement from students in history or civics or whatever it is you're looking at when we look at the topics that are impacting them now and the things that they're passionate about now. My favorite way to start projects in social studies with students is to ask them what they're pissed off about. And you get great results from things that students are proactive and passionate about, but man, angry teenager, what is more powerful than that, right? And so there's not anything happening in our world right now that hasn't been seen in some other iteration, whether it's within our country or within our world. And I got to give Chelsea credit for something she said on this topic on Indigenous Peoples Day. It was kind of rough around here. And she was trying to remind herself and reframe that, while we study history and we hope that we learn from history, we're also creating history on a daily basis. And so to be able to take students through current event topics and the evolution of that over time is really easy to do, and it helps them to understand better and to formulate better their opinions about the subject matter that's impacting them on the daily basis. So
I was also speaking to a student this morning similar about just communicating with some of my seniors about Indigenous Peoples Days and about the current state of the world and the empathy and frustration that I'm feeling, and reminding them that it is comforting to me to take that historical lens. And one of the students interjected, said he just recently watched a documentary on the Los Angeles riots and was stating his opinion on how it's, even in the short time, like we're still really struggling to learn from history. So to have these active seniors have that mindset going into the world is pretty reassuring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is reassuring, isn't it? It provides us great comfort. Well, let's look for some comfort here around science, since science seems to be getting attacked in all sorts of ways today. What are we going to do about this?
Right. So I'm going to touch on this slide shortly and then get super nerdy about what we're doing in the real world with science. But we have reframed all of our science curriculum around the next gen science practices, which most of the states have started to incorporate with their Common Core. And so while we are still doing chemistry and we're still doing biology and we're doing those things, really the way we're trying to evaluate students is on science practices. And so looking at all of the work they do through the lenses that are there at the bottom, asking and evaluating questions, looking at models, incorporating math into what they're doing, and then conducting investigations and testing hypotheses and all that good stuff. It's opened the door for us to not feel rat-holed in what we're doing within a science class. And so I'm going to go ahead and move on to what we're doing with our community partner because it's just too applicable not to. So I got to give a little context here. So we're in Durango, Colorado. We have had two major catastrophes, environmental catastrophes, happen in our area since 2015. The first one you probably remember because it was all over national news. Our beautiful Animas River turned a neon green and then a neon orange. This was due to some acid mine drainage and a full-on spill from a failed plug that the EPA had put in place at a mine up in Silverton, which is about 25 miles north of us. It's important to talk about this one because the Animas River is literally 2 blocks from our school, but it runs from here all the way to where it hits the San Juan River and then eventually the Colorado River. And so when we're talking about the starting with here and starting with now and then thinking globally, this thing that impacted our town actually impacted the quality of water for people, millions of people throughout the Southwest. And then the second one we're going to talk about was the 416 fire. This actually started on our last day of school where we were kind of having our like end of year get together in the park just below our campus here. And we saw it start. We literally saw the plumes of clouds. And the reason we're talking about this is because we had about 60,000 acres burn in about 6 weeks. And the whole area on the map that you see in the top right corner there, the deep trench in the middle of that is the Hermosa Creek drainage. And the Hermosa Creek runs into the Animas River. And so when you have a forest fire, it creates a layer of soot on the ground, soot and ash, which are both hydrophobic, which means that they completely retard water. And so after the fire, we had rains that caused horrendous flooding, mudslides, and all kinds of just environmentally catastrophic things. And so I'm going to move on to the next slide and talk about our students and what they're doing in the community partnership. So we decided that it wasn't good enough to just feel impacted by these events. And so with the help of students, we started looking for community partners where we could get involved. And so we found Mountain Studies Institute, which is a local nonprofit that collects environmental science data for the National Forest Service and the EPA. And they told me that their biggest issue was not having enough manpower to collect enough data to fuel all of the studies that were happening. And I told them that my biggest issue was I needed experts in the field to teach our students how to do field work and field biology and all those things. So our students are wrapping up this week a water quality study of the Animas, and they've also done a water quality study for the Hermosa Creek drainage, where students are actually going out and placing monitoring devices and collecting the data that's going into reports to the EPA. So for our students in Durango that, they're teenagers, right? So they barely see beyond the end of their nose. They're now participating in something that has not only national impact, but global impact. And that's what we're talking about when we say start with here and then start with now, but then think globally. They're just doing real world things that I could talk about this for 2 hours, but I run long when I get too crazy about it. But the one thing I want to say about the community partnership and why I'm talking about that conversation is schools don't have money. We don't have the resources that we wish we did. And we have thousands and thousands of nonprofits that have very highly educated experts in their field that don't have manpower. And so when you're looking at ways to get students out of the classroom or engage with their community, I would encourage all of you to look to your local nonprofits, because you can find something for every possible subject we teach in school, whether it's social justice or environmental science or personal finance or getting home loans. All of these organizations exist. And so there's definitely a way to find a mutually beneficial relationship that will cost you very little. So anyway, kids are doing cool stuff in science. Yeah, we just try and get kids out of the building and engaging with the world around them. That's the idea.
All right, so this is
what is this student up to before we go on, Chelsea? Maybe you could tell us.
Yeah, I wanted to share this particular student in the middle. His name is Patriot, and he was able to do an internship through MSI as well as participate in the experiences that we offer. And it's completely been a contributing factor to grow his passion for wetland restoration. So for his capstone project for his senior year at Big Picture, he's actually going to write a paper about the importance of wetland restoration and bring in his experiences that he's been able to have with both MSI and a local youth organization that takes students into the field. So he's making a collaborative effort between multiple opportunities that he's been able to have at Big Picture within community partnerships to create a larger capstone project that will be more impactful for the community.
I want to throw one more thing in here because I touched on it and didn't come back. So we were talking about students being able to access different coursework through the same experience. So the products the students are working on for this right now, some of them are looking at the chemistry of the water and I can't even talk today, and really analyzing the impacts of those two disasters and how it's changed the chemistry. Then some students are looking at biological factors, and they're looking at plant life and how it's changed around the rivers. They're looking at the caddisfly, which is, you know, one of the organisms that helps the fish population be sustained. And so through the same field work, we have students touching on chemistry, touching on biology, and touching on environmental science. And so that's kind of how the science practices have helped frame being able to access all of that.
I can't help but ask, now, how do you keep track of all of that?
Let me show you.
Great.
All right, let's do that. Let me see if I can get us to do that. Whoops, too far. Let me back up. There we go.
So in a very similar field, I have a student who, as a freshman, was extremely interested in becoming a chef and working with food. So he spent his first internship at a local restaurant working with a chef. And that passion and interest grew to where food came from, where it goes, how do we use food? So he created an independent project at the beginning of his junior year, which began, as you can see on the right, there's a number of standards within this project, the proposed standards that he was to reach. And with the use of Project Foundry, we're able to modify that project, whereas it began as a social studies and informative paper. Because of the student engagement, because the opportunities that grew through his passions, he was able to create a larger project which incorporated an internship with a table to farm composting company, which takes the compost from similar to a trash pickup around Durango and then compost that. And then the community has access to that compost for gardens and so forth. So this project, just based on his passions and engagement and the equity that he and I are able to create because of our relationship and my encouragement and how he's able to be his true self, has clearly, as you can see, grown into world geography about how it affects globally and what produce production looks like in California and the differences between commercially grown food and organically grown food. So whereas it started very small, because of the engagement of the student and because of the opportunities that were created because of his passions, this grew into a project that contains about 15 standards that he has hit through conversation, through presentations, through a Prezi that you'll see a screenshot on the next page of. He's been writing a paper regarding it, and he is actually in charge of our compost program in school. So, and that is even more relevant now than ever because of COVID and how we've needed to change our food system and our lunch program within our school. We have a lot more waste, so it actually has become even more and more relevant. So for him, you know, whereas it starts small, it has opportunities to be able to build authentically for the student, as well as for me being able to maintain that within Project Foundry, and the opportunities to edit and send notes to students and have feedback for that student, to be able to support me to maintain that project as I am also maintaining 20 other students' grad plans.
And it's, you know, I think it's important to talk about here, whether you're in project-based learning now, or you're thinking about getting into project-based learning, or it seems like a total crazy amount of work to do, scale and scope is always something that people have a concern about when we're talking about PBL. And so it's really important to note that, and it really is because of Project Foundry we're able to do this, but you have so many different ways to create a project. So we looked at math, where Mark was creating the guidelines for a project, and it wasn't a long project or a super deep project, but he set the deadlines and he set the expectations and he picked out the standards. Students in their independent projects, if you go that route, have the ability to propose standards and propose deadlines and propose dates, and then you have to approve them. So there's this give and take between you and the students, and you can have as much or as little control over what's happening as you like. And in this case with Chelsea, you know, we're a big picture school, so it's easy for me to advocate for letting a project take on a life of its own, because that's what we do, is interest and passion. But my argument for anyone skeptical about that is this is how kids discover their careers. This is how they might find something in life that they want to do. And most of the time, if it gets to the level of this one, it's something that they end up doing. And so, you know, the skepticism or the fear or just the concern about the overwhelming amount of work is immediately alleviated when you see how much control you have over what's going on.
One of the things that occurs to me as I'm looking at this and thinking about how this rolled out, Chelsea, for this student is, you know, is that this could have been a series of smaller projects, smaller experiences. It could have even been lessons or workshops or labs or a variety of things that could have stacked up to be this bigger learning experience. Or as you've done, it has grown and you've added and edited to the main experience. So you know, Foundry allows for that to happen. And I think, you know, doing that organically, just, it makes sense with students as that passion and interest grow and change. So,
No question.
Yeah. So
and the other thing I will mention is, because we have the opportunity where no students are on the same plan, you know, some students choose to do biology with more structure and guidance. I, of course, was able to communicate and have access to that science teacher to get guidance for myself and for this particular student for biology. So he was hitting the right expectations for the standards. But some students do certainly have that preference, is that instead of going large scale, there may not be as in depth as this particular student with their passions and interests, and really be discovering in a lot of other areas. So those students, again, have the opportunity in the management within Project Foundry to do small steps to discover their passions and interests, whereas you can see this student has a pretty driven passion that will likely turn into a career.
So I noticed here that this student who created this Prezi that we're going to look at, you know, proposed doing an analytical paper as his demonstration of learning, a Prezi, and also this interactive component. And I'm wondering, is that composting part of this, that he's running a composting business, that interactive component that was part of this?
You know, I think that kind of, like you said, organically evolved. The initial thought was that he was going to work within another kitchen to work with a chef who was working with local farms. And COVID did squash an opportunity that he was gaining to work in the initial steps of seed planting and cultivation within a local farm in the spring. COVID, unfortunately, that was an opportunity that he was able to fulfill. But the interactive component was the idea that we would find an opportunity for him within that. So it just set the manifesting of that opportunity. And then sure enough, the composting thing came to life in the middle of winter that gave him an opportunity to see that side of food while gardens weren't going here because it was winter time.
Yeah. All right, well, let's take a look at his Prezi, and note that he has set this Prezi into the context of basically school lunch, I think.
Another opportunity that we were hoping to support this student in was being able to work closely with our cafeteria supervisor. Unfortunately, again, due to COVID, we no longer have our own cafeteria on our campus. We go elsewhere for bringing food in, but that just goes to show that obviously the effects of COVID. However, it does still allow him, and he works in a restaurant now, so it's still a passion that he holds on to. Just opportunities vary because of the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And I think about all of this personal knowledge you have about this student, Chelsea, and it's like, well, how does that possibly happen? How many students are you advising?
I believe I currently have 20 seniors, and I believe that 13 of them have been with me since the beginning of freshman year.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that long-term relationship, knowledge over time, and the ability to manage all of this stuff. Let me throw that plug in for Foundry, the ability to keep track of all of that, because this is complex stuff.
I was telling Beth that I have a one-on-one schedule with a student for after this webinar, and prior to beginning this, I was going through Project Foundry to make sure that I had all my ducks in a row when I was going into that meeting to make sure that I could support her with what she needed to get done.
But I hope she was doing the same thing.
She probably was.
Yeah. So school lunch, right? And
after this, we have a question. I think would be a good break point right after this.
Good. I'm just going to power through this. We're not going to take time to read it, but you can see that this student has taken a dive into each of these areas of food and his conclusions about this. And basically what he said in the conclusion as I read it was like, this choice is yours. You have the option to choose as you wish, but here are reasons why you might choose. So so that's exciting.
Yeah, and this Prezi, like I said, this Prezi is accompanied by a paper, and then obviously not only a project that is within school, but a local project. And he worked closely with the Table to Farm folks to create a school presentation that can target all schools for a composting program as well.
So as he stands up to deliver what he knows, he's bringing a lot of expertise to this. So that's exciting. So Beth, we'll keep our cows and pigs and chickens here while you ask a question.
Yes, that is a great lead into this question. Do you engage an authentic audience in your students' presentations of learning? How do you get that to happen?
Well, I'll go. So yes, we do. So typically there's a combination of things for audience. So we try to always bring in any of the mentors our students have from project work or internships. Their parents are required to be there for these exhibitions. And then they typically have 2 panel members that are students within the building. Some of them are upperclassmen, some of them are lowerclassmen. And then there's also an audience. So there's a panel for the presentation that's there to give feedback and ask questions. And then there's also the audience that's there as much to engage with the presentation as to learn about giving feedback. It's asking tough questions of our students is probably my favorite part of every semester. So that's how we build the audience for these things.
Yeah, and our exhibitions of learning are quarterly. First and second quarter are more of a gallery style where there is a smaller audience and a more intimate conversation about learning. And then our semester exhibitions are essentially what take place of finals, where we encourage a lot of self-reflection. Students often use screenshots from their performance page of Project Foundry to really dial in where they're at academically, as well as bringing in their social and personal goals that they have. So where this builds some agency is that advisors are also encouraged to do their own self-reflection and use their own exhibitions to demonstrate not only model projects, but also be authentic in and transparent in their own learning. Because I would say that it's often that advisors or teachers learn a lot right alongside with their students in terms of growth. So it just shows that mutual relationship of respect that, you know, I'm not here just to cram your brain with facts and information. I'm here growing along with you and learning along with you.
So teachers are doing their own exhibitions of their own learning. So I'm beginning to imagine that whole flip that gets done on teacher evaluation, right? Now suddenly teachers are driving their own professional learning and their own growth and how it's impacting their students. So really powerful.
Yeah.
Anything else here on exhibitions of learning? Are we good to go?
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. So here we go, senior thesis project.
Yeah, so this is my first year having seniors at Big Picture, and like I said, I've been with them since many of them since their freshman year. So their senior thesis project is their final capstone project of their Big Picture career, where they use their passions and interests to really drive an idea or a problem that is a global issue and then bring it locally. So this project encompasses a college level persuasive paper, as well as a project that they bring to our community to share what they've discovered and to provide that impact for the community. It also really challenges students academically to take a deeper look into their passions and figure out like what it may mean and how they can connect to other audience members that would appreciate that information. So identifying secondary sources, looking at primary sources that they can use within the community to really impact their project and impact themselves and make them the professional in that and that idea and that philosophy. So it allows students to really bring in their voice and their drive and what is next for them. And they not only have as we discussed audience earlier, their expectations for senior spring is a senior fair, where they bring that content from that paper and the project that they completed for that paper. And we invite the entire community to come to that presentation where each senior has a chance to really share their findings and their voice and their impact with the community.
So then we're going to take a look at this young woman. You can introduce us to her, but if I understood you correctly, then she would have done all the things you just talked about, or will be doing all of the things you just talked about. And so she's in the process right now of reflecting on that and getting ready to do that. Is that right? All right. Anything else you want to tell us about her before we hear from Ava?
So Ava's a pretty exceptional student. She really struggled in middle school. She had a really bad snowboarding accident, which kept her homebound for a majority of 7th and 8th grade. She also struggles with ADHD, and in terms of really finding her niche and finding her flow within academics has been challenging to her. So when I approached her about what she'd like her topic to be, she talked about how her relationship with ADHD has been something that she's been struggling with for a long time, but I'll let her share more information about it. But just in terms of how she wants to take the impact that she's felt and bring it to students or adults who may feel the same.
Well, let's hear from Ava.
Hi, my name is Ava. I go to Big Picture High School, the alternative school, and one of the topics that I'm working on are the alternative resources to ADHD medication. The reason why I chose this topic is because it is relevant to me and it's relevant to the way I grew up. I felt like I was put on ADHD medication very early, and in ways it has affected my brain and the way I work and the way I, function within a school realm, I guess you could say. And recently-ish, I've been taken off of ADHD medication to see how well I would work within school, to see how well I can benefit from alternative resources. And I have found it more beneficial for me to be to be able to use these alternative resources. And different ways that I feel like I can help impact the community is to show people that there is more than just medicine, more than just what can balance different pH levels, so on and so forth. Big Picture High School has been very beneficial for me because of its alternative resources, being able to explore my different passions and be able to explore what's important to me has given me more of a drive to push towards my projects and push towards my end goal of being able to graduate on time or graduate early. And it's really been a big help.
Looks like a very special young woman.
And it's cool if we go back to, this is going to be her capstone project, but when we think of her opportunities and the alternative resources she used, she's completing chemistry through an internship that she had last year where she's studying thermodynamics and their effects of clay glaze and how it interacts with the kiln. So by having engagement with our community and by engaging with her about how she learns best and how she wants to engage with her learning, it really has helped her achieve things that it may not have been a route that every student was able to take, but it provided her with a unique opportunity to complete chemistry and make those connections with different parts of the world.
I can't help but think about this young woman in another learning environment, a more traditional learning environment, how much of an outlier she might have been, and how differently her education might have unrolled during high school. It's a powerful statement about what you're doing in terms of passion and interest for students, and I congratulate you. You should be very proud of the work you're doing. Whoops, not again. Right here, I want to just touch on this and look again at the levers, of time and relationship, and having an authentic audience for students to interact with and become expert with and for. Building their own agency and the amount of reflection this prompts in students to really own their own learning. So I want to challenge everyone to think about the examples that you've seen today from Durango Big Picture and the kinds of structures that you might be building to actually accomplish this kind of work. These are really powerful levers that we recommend highly. And I just wanted to show you a few things from Foundry that support the work that is happening at Durango Big Picture. This is a personal learning plan for student Aaliyah, and here she's make a personal statement of who she is as person and learner. She maintains this actively as she is growing and changing. She describes her own personal goals, social goals, and academic goals, things that she really cares about. Teachers can interact, or mentors can interact with students here in regard to their goals. All of this is about keeping our eye on the prize, and that's the student. And where is the student now? Where is the student going? Here and now. Foundry has the capacity to work as a planning place for learning experiences of all kinds. We're looking at a project right here, but this could be a course, it could be a workshop, it could be a lab, it could be field work, it could be a service learning project. All of these can be managed in Foundry. And you can see here the choice of learning target standards, competencies have been brought together in an interdisciplinary way. Same with skills, 21st century skills, habits of mind, and learning materials stacked up, all organized in a place. And the work, the planning work and all of the work within Foundry is highly dialogic, the opportunity for students to be talking with teachers and teachers with students throughout the work. It's a very important part of what goes on in Foundry. And that happens through journaling. And the ongoing journals that students can do in Foundry and share with their teachers and conversation about it along the way. And this whole time that we're in right now of being separated and asynchronous learning being a really important part of much of what's going on. Foundry's journals and learning logs, where it can be captured by time, the work that's going on and the reflection on that work. How did I use my time? How effective was my use of time for me? And teachers having the opportunity to talk with students about that use of time and how they're growing. The ability to capture the data as work is evaluated onto the performance page. So when Chelsea said that she was reviewing data for talking with her students, some of that review, and I'm hoping some of the students' review, is around what has been completed, what's in progress, and what remains to be done, as can be seen in the pie on this page. And all of that data is in Foundry, this organized according to the Common Core and Next Gen Science standards, but all of that can be done locally as to the local standards or targets or competencies, and the detail right down to what the student will do. So
Can I throw it? I want to throw in a Emil. So we've talked a lot about, you know, from the teacher and educator lens today, but it's important to note I'm an administrator and a teacher right now. And if there are any administrators, or if that's part of our audience at all today, for me, one of the best things about Foundry is that I get to organize things in groups. And so when I need to take the pulse of how our school is doing, I can separate it and I can look at Chelsea and her seniors and I can see where they stand academically. I can see where they're at on their skills. I can look at the whole school as a group and see where all the students are at. And so, and it's not like having to figure out which one of 48 reports to run. It's click on one button and you get what you need. And so that's a big deal for us, because we have other learning management systems in the district, and it's just not easy. So I just wanted to throw that piece in there.
Yeah, yep. You know, thanks for doing that. It is part of the power of this. I think the most powerful part of this is the ability to do interdisciplinary standards-based learning, and to do that in a way that's really authentic to the kind of learning and work that teachers and students want to do together. That's most powerful. We're almost out of time, so I just want to say, wherever it is that your kids are headed, whatever why your students are exploring, we really want to encourage you, we want to support you, and we really are thankful for the very challenging work that everyone's doing right now. Whatever your vision is, Foundry is here to help support that, and guide your path to deeper learning if we can be of help to you. Dreer, I know that you had said that you're happy to talk with people about this work as well, if I recall.
Absolutely. You know, if you're working with Foundry, if you're working with Common Core, I have probably 10 different iterations of content standards and graduation plans. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of us using this. There are a lot of us that have the same sets of standards to work from. So please reach out. You know, it's not an easy task to get any learning management system off the ground, and people are there to support you in that. So feel free, reach out.
Well, we have a great community for that. Do we have any more questions, Beth?
Yes, one last question. I think I can actually answer it, and that is, will this presentation be available to share with others? And yes, it will be. It will be on our website probably within 2 or 3 days. And then we will also send you an email notification to let you know that it's up. We would love it if you would share.
Well, thank you so much. Beth, thank you. And Dreer and Chelsea, thank you so much for the work you do and for your generosity in sharing this. It takes time to prepare to do this. And we know time is a dear resource right now. So we wish you well in Durango and all of the rest of you in all of the work that you're doing. Thank you. Glad you were here today.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.